So next up, we'll work on this piece of text, the nav at the top of the page. We want it to look like this. So a nicer font, everything's uppercased, there's some spacing, right? It's in line here, and it might be hard to see, but there's this very long extended line going underneath in this light gray color. It's just a border on the bottom. So that's actually a bit of a hint. If this is a border on the bottom, it tells us that the element itself, if I inspect it, is quite wide. Let's go back, right? You see all that green there? It goes all the way across here, basically the exact same width and the same margin as one of these images. So that element is just set up to be a nav right now in our HTML. Right there, put your name in there if you want that slash for this very hip minimalist effect. You can do that. You can put a logo in there, a little emoji, an icon, whatever you want. We're going to begin by styling it. We'll ignore the font for now, but we'll work on the width and the border bottom. So let's go to our CSS. Let's select that nav. Technically all navs, we just have one. Kind of being lazy about that. But if we expanded our markup and added more navs, we definitely would want an ID or a class or something. So what I'm going to do is start by, here's a quick win, text transform uppercase. We saw this a while back. Just uppercase all of my text. I could just do that in the markup itself, but sometimes you don't want that. You want to preserve your markup and just display it with uppercase letters. Next up, let's add a border bottom. So border bottom is going to be 2 pixels, and then I just have the color in front of me. It's a hex color, F1, F1, F1. Like that. Okay. It might be hard to see, but there's that border bottom, and it goes all the way across right now. So what I'm going to do is just replicate exactly what we did for our image. I'm going to say, don't go all the way across. Just go 30% of the way. They're in the same parent container, the body, so 30% is the same. But this isn't quite matching up because there's margin on this image, and there's not margin on this nav. So we can add that margin in, the exact same margin if we want. Refresh, and now they're in line. But I kind of screwed things up by saying margin on all sides because I don't want this space here. I don't want that space up top, or maybe I do, but I definitely don't want it down here. So I'm going to revise that to be margin left. Okay, great. What else? If we look at how this is spaced out, ignoring the font, there's a lot more space between that element or between the text and its border. Here, no space. So how do we increase that space? Padding. And I'm also going to add padding on the top. So it will be top and bottom. And, you can figure out what number works best. For now, I'll just do pixels if we want. We can rework it with M's or something, but I'll do 20 pixels, top and bottom, 0 left and right. And there we are. 20 there, no padding on the side. Okay? And then what else do we have left, really? We need to add in the font, and I think that's kind of it. Otherwise, we're in good shape. We want to change the font and the font weight. And I used a Google font, a really common one, Railway. So if we go to Google Fonts, it's probably in the top most popular ones. If we sort by most popular, you can also just search for it. Okay, here it is. I'm going to select, I think the only font weight I actually want is 800. So that's all I'm going to use. You could use a lighter one if you prefer it, but here is 800. And that's it. So I'm going to embed this in my HTML like that. And then all I need to do is set font family to Railway. So I'm going to do that for my nav, just like that. Let's take a look. And there we are. I think the only remaining difference at this point is the font size itself, which we could definitely increase, and we could play around with here just in our dev tools. So select the elements, and then if we go to font size, which I never set, font size, what would look best in there? We could start with a hard-coded number like 25 pixels, and that looks good, but then what about on that's a bit extreme. Well, actually, looks okay enough, on a mobile-ish layout. We don't want this to scale and get super small, so we almost never use percentages for font sizes. We could use something like M's if we wanted to, maybe 1.5 ems or so. Yeah, that looks good there. And yeah, I think that's pretty good. We could use ems for the padding as well. So if we're going to set the font size to be 1.5 ems, 1.5 ems, then for that padding, instead of doing 20 pixels top and bottom, we could do 1.5 ems top and bottom. Let's see how that looks. Might be a bit too much. So let's do like 1.2 ems maybe. How's that look? I think that's pretty good. And the nice thing about doing that is that if we do increase this font size at some point, like to 3.5 ems, that padding will increase as well, which you may or may not want, honestly, but I'm going to use ems here. I generally prefer ems over pixels. Let's do 1.2 for padding. Okay, and that's it at this point. So nothing crazy. Very simple web page, only 10 elements, and 9 of them are images. There is one very important note that I am going to cover in this video that some of you may have encountered if you tweaked some of this code in here. This is a separate topic, so we're not going to change the styles. We're done with the app, but just a little note here that I'm sure will come up. What happens if I have my images on separate lines like this, which is how you probably would type it up yourself, right? This is at least how I would approach it. Instead of having them the way that I gave them to you, I put them on the same line, like they all just start and there's no space in between. Let's see what happens. What happens here? Why on earth do they go onto separate lines? We don't get 3 across anymore. Well, this is a really annoying thing in HTML. It actually has to do with white space. Here, there's a white space character between our images. And here, there's a white space character as well. Think of it like this. If I have 2 spans and images are both inline-ish elements. And if I have like, hello, and then another span right here, world, and I put a return between them, can you see that there's a space there? It's not just hello world jammed together into a single word. Versus if I did it like this right there, there's no white space character. And where are they? It is jammed together into a single word with no space between. Well, the same thing applies to our images. And this is just a very well-known, obnoxious part of HTML. If you are working with images like this, when we get to Flexbox, this won't be an issue whatsoever. But here, where we have these very specific calculations for width and for margin, they all get thrown off because we're calculating everything, assuming that the only elements we need to account for are these 3 images on each row. But in reality, there's actually a space in between and another space, a white space character in HTML in between here, and that has a width, and that screws everything up. So that's why I gave it to you like this, which is weird, but there's a reason for that. So if you run into that issue, just make sure that you get rid of any spaces between your images, delete all spaces, save the file again. You can format it nicely like I have here so that it still looks like separate images, and they are separate images, but they are running into one another, and they don't each get their own line. So kind of annoying, but with Flexbox, we won't have to worry about it.